Hey everybody out there, this is Patrick Perry with Crypted Quest, and tonight is our first episode. We're going to do it solo, so please enjoy.
For anybody or by any means, but I've had a Bigfoot experience that I'm sure a lot of you have heard. I've told my story on Sasquatch Chronicles, episode 724, The Sounds They Make. I've been on Sasquatch Theory on YouTube. A friend of mine, Miguel, runs that show, and we became friends after I interviewed with him. And that is called Merrimack Bigfoot. I've been on Linda Eastburn's program. I've been on Crypted Creatures. I've been on Understanding Bigfoot. That's the name I was trying to look for. I had to search in my head a little bit. So I'm going to tell you right now, one thing you're going to get from this podcast is a whole lot of F-ups. But they're going to be fun and funny because I'm going to keep the show rolling no matter what happens. So my story is, I was staying with my sister out in St. Clair. At that point in time, I used to be a union carpenter. I was laid off at the time and really didn't have much else to do but deer hunt. So I was hanging out at my sister's house. She had property, a lot of deer, and I was scouting them out during the day. They had a nice little field. I set up a blind in the corner of the field. So if you're looking at the field, it was basically a rectangle, and I was in the very corner of it, and I had the whole field to watch. And for a while, it was bow season, but I was going out there and I was checking out the deer, just, early in the season, so wasn't really getting in any big hurry. And all of a sudden, I noticed I hadn't been seeing the deer in the daytime like I had before. And I don't know if this really pertains to the story or not, but there's a cave right off the Merrimack that I used to love and go. I loved going down there, exploring it, checking it out. It had a beautiful view over the valley across the river and the river itself. You could sit right out in front of this cave and just chill and take in everything. And I loved going down there. It was my church, my peace. And so one day before I was gonna go hunt, I asked my sister if she minded if I stayed in the blind overnight to see what the deer were doing, because all of a sudden, like I said, I was seeing 10, 15 deer a day. All of a sudden, nothing at all. And she's like, I don't mind. She's like, I want meat on the table. And I tried to be an ethical hunter, but sometimes in life, she didn't have a job at the time. She just got laid off from a nursing home. My brother-in-law, who is now deceased, love you, Jim, up in heaven. And I, like I said, I just got laid off myself. So I'm like, you know what? A little bit of meat on the table is not going to hurt anybody if I can get something accomplished. And you can save your hate mail because I'm a country boy, and that's what we do when it's necessary. Not all the time. And earlier, and she said that was fine, and earlier in the day, just to pass the time, I took a hike down to the cave. Didn't really think much of it. Walked down there and walked back to my blind about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Got settled in. Was watching the fields. Everything was really quiet that day. Didn't see anything. Didn't hear anything. Well, I sat there, and I sat there, and I sat there. And then about 8 o'clock, and I can't be for sure what time it was, I fell asleep. I had a blanket and everything in that blind with me. It was a ground blind, nothing spectacular, with a fold-out chair in it. And I had a crossbow. I had 2 extra arrows and 1 in the knot. So I sat there, and I eventually fell asleep. When I woke up, I was awoken by a sound that I've never, ever, ever heard before in these woods. Excuse me. It was a sound that when I first heard it, I thought to myself, is that a silverback gorilla? I was really confused because I've been hunting in these woods since I was 8 years old. Running around on my own with my nephew, with his cousins, with whoever we ran around with. We were out there. So we basically knew these woods, top to bottom, back and forth. Well, let me back it up a minute. When I was 13, an unusual thing happened because we used to go down to the cabin close to where this took place at on the Merrimack. And I was 13 at the time. I had a little dachshund. We were walking down the logging road, and it was right near that cave, where all of a sudden my dachshund, her hair started standing up on her back, and she was growling and looking up into the woods, and I can't see anything. She is on point on something, and I don't know what it is. And I asked her, I was like, what's wrong, girl? What's wrong? And about that time, she starts squealing like somebody just beat her and running the opposite direction. So I'm 13, I'm scared too. So now I'm following the dog running, and I could hear something paralleling us through the woods, up the hillside, towards that cave, following us. And we ran. We got all the way back to the cabin, and everybody laughed at us and said, oh, that was nothing. It was just a deer. And at that point in time, yeah, I'm 13, I bought it. I'm like, yeah, it was a deer. But nowadays, I'm like, a deer ain't going to follow you. It's going to run the opposite direction. But nonetheless, it happened. So to get back to where I was going, I'm in the blind, and I start to fall asleep, and I do fall asleep, and I hear the gorilla noises, which wake me up at 2 a.m. I still remember looking at my phone. I don't know that it was exactly 2 a.m., but it was right there. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, it's pitch black, and I'm like, what the hell is making that sound? Well, after a while, I could hear it behind me. It couldn't have been, but it's hard to judge when you can't see. It was breaking branches, kicking up leaves, and making a sound like, oh, oh, oh. Like, sounded like a silverback gorilla to me, is what it sounded like. I watched a lot of nature programs and never heard anything like it before in my life in the woods of Missouri. So it finally stops that portion, and I can hear it moving the tree line, then up the other side of the tree line, which started to worry me a whole lot because the field in front of me, the moon was out. I don't know that it was full, but it was out, and it was really bright. And then when I could hear it, and it started whooping, like, woo, woo, really loud. Like I could feel it vibrate in my body. I could feel it vibrate in my body when it was behind me. And I'm thinking, and there's people's houses that are like quarter mile, half mile away from where I'm at. So I'm thinking, this has got to be waking somebody up. They got to be calling the cops. But nothing. So I'm just sitting there, and then I start have visions of what I might see walk across this field, because that's what I thought was going to happen. I thought this thing was going to come out in front of me. And that's when I would have had to make a decision on whether to launch that arrow or not. Because I could tell from the volume of these sounds that whatever was making them, arrow's not going to do it. And then, if I do launch an arrow, I'm not going to have enough time to get another one knocked before it gets to me. So I'm scared to death. I don't want to make that decision. I started praying to God. At that point, I started praying to God. I do not want to see what's making these sounds. And you guys might be laughing at me and saying I'm full of BS, but I did. I started praying. Not out loud, in my head. Because out loud, I was making as little noise as I possibly could. I did not want to move in the chair. I made my heart rate go down so where I was breathing so quietly, I was hoping nothing would hear me. I had the crossbow pressed to my chest, just waiting for something to happen. That eventually turned into, and I don't know if my prayers did anything or what, but I heard it coming back. And it went not completely behind my blind this time, but off to the right a little bit. And it started, if anybody out there has heard Ron Moorhead's The Sierra Sounds, it's the one where he says that they are arguing over food, but to me it sounded like demonic chatter, like something was trying to talk, and it was ungodly. At that point I thought I was dealing with a demon. I didn't know. I mean, it didn't sound like a gorilla or a monkey anymore. It didn't sound like a man. It didn't sound like anything I've ever heard on the face of this earth, ever, anywhere. In recordings or except for Ron Moorhead's. And that was I think the turning point for me. When I heard that, it kind of clicked, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think that is what I encountered that night. So I took my story to my sister on it. Not a story, it's an experience, because it happened. And I started explaining it to her, and she said that she'd heard the same sounds behind her house on more than one occasion. And in future episodes, she recorded some later in life that I will be able to bring and play for you on air. I don't have them tonight though, but I'll take care of that. Little teaser for you. And she said she heard the snarling, growling sound going back and forth behind her bedroom window at her house. And the next day, my nephew John went out to the woods and found reddish brown hair, 6 to 8 inches long, on a barbed wire fence right behind the house. There's no cattle, no deer. Well, I mean, there's deer, but deer don't have 6 to 8 inch long hair. There's no horses. I mean, there's no animals running around back there that would have that type of hair that I can think of. I mean, and especially on the top of four strand barbed wire fence. That, that's pretty tall. So I kind of let that sink in a little bit, and then I proceeded to tell my daughter Taryn about it. And I told her, I said, I'm not crazy. This really happened. This is what I heard. And I explained it to her. I told her about the sounds. And I figured she was just going to say, you're crazy, Dad. She didn't. She looked at her boyfriend, knew she'd been dating for a while. And he was a good church-going kid. His dad was a hard-working farmer. And he looked at me, and she looked at him and said, go ahead, tell him. And he proceeded to tell me that his dad and a partner of his were on the Merrimack River, where I was at, about a mile up from where I had my experience. They were out there looking for land to farm, like rent land to farm, which is common around here. So they're checking it out and told his son that, well, it got about dark, about dusk. And all of a sudden he started hearing whooping sounds, snarling sounds, gorilla sounds. And him and his buddy got really worried. So they ran back to their vehicle. They got in it. And they started it up, tried to take off. All of a sudden, the back end of the car gets lifted up off the ground. His dad told his son that he looked behind him and all he could see was a dome-shaped head and shoulders covered with hair. Eventually it dropped the car and they got out of there. Well, that's not exactly where the tale ends. So I got a few more tidbits just to add on to it. So I couldn't give up on that cave. As much as the area scared me, I wasn't going hunting out there ever again. So that stopped. But I still like to go down to the cave, and I like to go down there at daytime. I didn't want to be out there after dark. So on one particular trip, and this is strange, I saw a squirrel. And it was, to the best that I can explain it, was peeled like a banana. The head was still there, but it looked like somebody or something just took the skin and peeled it down, and all the skin was peeled over the tail. I do have a picture of it. I need to hunt it up. But it was all peeled over the tail, and all the meat was eaten off the bones. Which, I don't know. I thought that was a little odd. But that was on the way to the cave, the trail to the cave, because there was a pretty good trail, because obviously Indians lived back there back in the day. When I started going to it, nobody went to this place. Nobody. So, and then there was one more thing, well, actually two more things that happened. There was another time where I got caught out there, and it got dark before I got back to my vehicle. And don't call me woo or anything, because I don't know if this had anything to do with Bigfoot or any other cryptid, but I thought it was a drone. But it was a ball of light up in the sky. And it wasn't making any noise. It wasn't really putting off a whole lot of light. It was about the size of a baseball. And it just followed me everywhere I went. I got really worried. I because honestly, I really wasn't supposed to be on this property. So I thought maybe somebody was following me with the drone, and that could have been this or that. I don't know. I'm just saying it was dark out and nothing ever became of it. It ended up disappearing, but this is all in the same area. And then not long after that, I took one of my exes down there to the cave because, like I said, I love the cave. I love going down there sitting. We went down there and we were sitting out in front of the cave, and it was a beautiful night. The sun was starting to go down, so we started to leave. We got almost back to the truck, and all of a sudden we hear out one part, and it came from 4 different directions, but I mean way louder than that, like whoa. Then we heard one behind us, then we heard one over here, then we heard one over here, and all points were along that river, because I've looked at a map since, and all points were along that river. She looked at me and she said, "What do you think that was?" I said, "Well, didn't sound human. It wasn't a dog, wasn't a coyote." I'm like, not really sure. And then we left. And then about a week later, and this was the last time I made a trip out to the cave. About a week later, the both of us went back out there. Kind of the same scenario, except for this time we're sitting in front of the cave looking at the river, and all of a sudden I hear the gorilla sounds again. Sounds like a silverback gorilla running down the hill on the other side of the river. We can't see anything, but we can hear it. It's making a ruckus, and it's making all kinds of vocalizations and everything. And the girl I'm talking about never believed any of my stories anyway. But this day she did. Because her eyes got as big as saucers, and she said, "OMG, that does sound like a monkey." And I looked at her and I said, I told you. And then I motioned to her like this, "Be quiet." Because at that point I started to get scared, because we're out in the woods and it's getting dark quick. So I told her to be still, stay where she was. I walked down the path and I found, and nobody knows what wood knocks or any of these sounds or anything means, because we don't know. We don't have one in our garages, as people say. But I wanted to try something, because I wasn't sure if we'd be able to make it back to my truck without something coming after us. So I went down the trail a little bit, and I found a big log, and I smacked a tree as hard as I could, and man, it echoed through the valley. And when I came back to her, and I didn't hear this is by what she said. She said, "When you did that," she said, "it sounded like a scared chimpanzee running up the hillside. I could hear it running through the leaves, and it was going whoop, 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 like it was scared." I'm like, all right, well, that's our cue to get the F out of here. So that was pretty much it for my story. But that's what launched me into this podcast. And with this podcast, I truly want to explore everything out there. Granted, I'm a big Bigfoot believer, no pun intended, because I've had an experience that I cannot explain. And the best way to explain it is with that. But then I started thinking about everybody else's story that's out there. About Chupacabra, Wendigo, Ozark Howler, giants, you name it. Loch Ness Monster, pugwudgies, mermaids, all those different things. Mothman. I mean, they never stop coming. Wendigo. I mean, there's so many. Dogman. Actually, one of my favorites other than Bigfoot. Not had an experience. And I'm not sure I really want to, because those experiences scared the F out of me. I was scared, but I think that would really scare me. But there's so many people with so many stories, and we're not all crazy. We're not all crazy. There's something to each and every one of those stories. Not everybody's lying. Granted, there's a few losers out there that are going to make stuff up to make themselves feel important. But to those of us that have real stories and real fears from those stories and real thoughts about what the hell is really out there, that's what this place is going to be about. You can come talk. I'm not going to judge you. I am not going to call you a liar. I am not going to laugh at you. I want to hear each and every one of your stories. And if you have any suggestions on future guests who you would like me to talk to, or subjects, what you want me to investigate or check out, let me know. I'll do my best to get out there and find the answers for you. I do have some pretty big guests lined up. First off, I'm going to start out with the little guys, because you know what? Most of us out there are little guys. I'm a little guy. So I'm going to start off with my sisters, which one would be my sister Anna, where my experience took place on her property. I would love to bring her on here and tell some of the things she's seen and she's heard in her life, and they're interesting. Next, I'd like to bring my sister Chacha on. She's actually seen one, which I never knew about, and this is another thing. If you've seen something, say something. That is a phrase from one of my favorite podcasts out there. And that's what he says at the end of every time. If you've seen something, say something. Don't keep it inside. Because she never told me about her experience until she heard about mine. She thought I'd say she was crazy. And I'm like, Chach, I heard a gorilla in the woods. Are you going to call me crazy? She's like, well, I saw one. In Missouri? Yep. Okay, no, you're not crazy. Because if I heard one, I'm sure there's one out there to see too. I'm going to bring her on. Got RPG lined up. Pretty excited about that. Ryan Goldenbeski. He was supposed to be on the original season of Discovering Bigfoot. And if you were into that show at all, I don't even think they got the first episode filmed. And he got zapped, what they call zapped, which they think could be infrasound. There's a discussion for an entirely different day. But something happened to him to where he just got so violently sick he couldn't go on it. And I think that's how the story goes. But when we bring him on, we're going to talk to him about it. He's real good friends, went to high school with my wife, so it was kind of like a really cool hookup. Because he's a hell of a nice guy. And he's been into the Conjuring House, which is a lot of crazy stories that we're going to bring on here. You know what? Because ghosts, they're part of all this too. You know? It's all part of it. And I'm trying to get a few more people on. I've got quite a few lined up. I got a guy I'm seriously hammering to try and get on here. He's seen the White River Monster, which brings me to another thing. I want to do like a local series. Like here in Missouri, we've got a lot of local legends, monsters, like the White River Monster. A guy that says he's seen it. And I want to get him on. The Ozark Howler. I know somebody who's had experiences with that. Well, of course, Momo, the Missouri Monster. There's been a lot of Dogman stories around here too. And actually, one of the ones that really intrigues me is a lot of people around here, and I got to hunt one of these people down and get them on here. They've seen a creature that's a lot like the creature from Jeepers Creepers, which is scary beyond belief. I don't even want to think about running into that. Also working on getting Miguel Ramirez on here. That's my buddy from Sasquatch Theory. He's got a lot of tales and stories, and I like to pick his brain about some of his favorite encounters that he's heard about, because he's been doing this a while now. Got Sean Forker to say he'd come on with me. But like I said, these are all tentative. I still got to get them on here. I got to get this thing launched. And you guys got to watch it for me to get these things going, because the more people watch, the more I can do with this podcast. It's going to make it worth my while, and hopefully worth your while. Also, I've got Michael Freeman lined up, and I'm sure if anybody out there in the Bigfoot world knows anything, they know Michael Freeman is the son of Paul Freeman, which got some of the stuff on display behind me. I honestly think the second greatest Bigfoot video that's out there, besides the Patty film. A lot of people try to say it's fake and it's not real, but I think it's real. I think he's got legit material on his hands. And his son's carrying on the tradition. And he's already told me, and all these people I've talked to, they said yes, they'll come on. But still, until I get them on here, they're not on. Just because they say they will, don't mean they will. But I'm gonna do everything to get them on here I can, and we're gonna have a good time at it, and we're gonna hear a lot of interesting stories. And this is going to be our safe place for the craziness that's out there in this cryptid world. So if y'all just keep it crazy, keep it legit, and have some fun. If you got some stories you want to get a hold of me, you go right here to this link and tell me what you got. I don't care if it is you asking for a future guest, a future subject, or you got a story to tell. I want it all. I want it all. And then that's where we're going to go with it. Until next time, everybody out there in the cryptid world, keep it creepy.